Hey, I'm Vicky, and this is the Just Be Better podcast, where today we will try to find out whether traditional HR is really dead and how someone can become a CTO of a business. We have Claus Villumsen with us, an experienced CTO and people manager with over 20 years of experience, sharing his journey and insight with us. Welcome to the podcast, Claus. Could you start by giving our listeners a brief overview of your background and your career journey so far?
Hello, my name is Claus Villumsen. I'm the CTO of Codebase. I started as a software developer and then I moved into management, and I've been managing predominantly software developers for 25 years or something like that. Good or bad, a lot of learnings, a long way, rocky road, did a lot of mistakes. Today we have a small company of 40 software developers that we are managing. Everything is remote and we're making applications for enterprises in Northern Europe. And I have a couple of applications we make ourselves, mostly to help our productivity, but we also sell that small performance feedback tool.
So I'm going to bring you back to your very early days of your career, if that's okay. As you said, you've been in tech for quite some time now. Why did you choose this field in general?
I guess, like everybody else, by chance and opportunity. I actually started as an environmental engineer. I had a degree in that. I was supposed to do wastewater treatment plants, and then when I worked, they were just having a need for software to help them facilitate making the projects and projections of different wastewater treatment solutions. So I got into that, and that's how it all started. And then I got hooked and I quit my job, and then I got a real software engineer job after, where I was educate myself as a Java programmer, and things just took off from that.
One of the questions that I get to ask quite a lot, especially from graduate people, when they're trying to decide what language to go to or how to choose if they prefer front end, back end, full stack. What was your thought process on that? Was it more of oh, they need Java developer and I'm going to be a Java developer now?
Actually, yes, it was because there was a need for it. I also find you see a lot of application out there. They're made in different ways, and you always think there's an underlying strategy that that's why they made it in that specific language and so on. What I find is more coincidental is that the guy who was available at the moment could code Java, and that's why the whole thing is made in Java. Throughout my entire career, it's been like that. Whatever we could get of that kind of people, that's what our choice was for the application. I rarely see that where you really outline it's like this is the best language. So that's also going back to the candidate. What should you actually do? There's always the safe bet of taking the languages that are known. Java, C Sharp, PHP, even Python and stuff. And then you could say, oh, like this is where the money is at, and it will always be. If that's where your focus is, just go out, get a job real fast, make some money. So I'll choose that. If you're a little more adventurous, a little more project based, you can go for some of the new ones, I would say. But that's more optimistic. And you will also see a lot of startups going with very new languages, and there's not a lot of money in startups. So there will be a lot of different projects with shorter time span.
When you look through your career, then, Klaus, what would you say was the biggest challenges you had to face in your career as a developer before you became a CTO and a manager?
That's a good question. I didn't think of that. I think it's the same challenge that every time I hire in a developer today, I ask them the same. What's the biggest stress you have? What's the most horrible situation in your life? And pretty much everybody says the same, and that's also what I have. Is the stress that managers are putting on top of you, meeting deadlines with unreasonable project scopes or customers unrealistic timelines and stuff like that. On top of that, there's no compensation for the extra hours that you as an employee have to put in. Long days, weekends, holidays. You don't get any of that. You're just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. That's been that for since I started as well. I had the same issue, and it's the lack of understanding on how important it is for a software developer to be focused, to be able to create quality. There's this rule where you say it takes you 23 minutes to get back into the thought process. Even though you're disturbed just for a couple of seconds, it still takes you 23. How many times do you have 23 minutes a day? Not very lot, right? And if you constantly get interrupted or annoyed or whatever by your coworkers, your managers, or a customer, or the phone calling, you don't get a lot done, and the quality is lacking. And as a developer, you're asked to estimate the hours, like how long is it gonna take you, because we need to plan it. And you put your word on it, you get held up on it, like this is the the promise that you do, right? And then they can always interrupt you on the way, and then they still expect you to deliver on your promise, but you can't. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for just me and all kind of other developers. What we do, as I know this, I give them the focus. I give them the option to press the button and say, now you don't disturb me because I promised you I would have it in 8 hours. So I'm going to ask you not to bother me for 8 hours. And that as a manager, you have to respect. Say, okay, and not just me, but everybody else as
I
well.
actually think a lot of people firstly think they can do much more in the specific time than they actually can. So they already being quite optimistic. And then when you have managers putting random meetings in your calendars, asking you sometimes valid questions, but most of the time they can wait a couple of hours. It just prolongs everything by so much. But then the fault goes not on a manager, but it goes on an employee.
It's a weak management in a way. Sorry to put it like that, because we're shuffling priorities all the time. There could be one customer yelling at you with one issue and another customer with something completely, and you have to choose. And if you're bad at saying, well, we're going to do this and then everything can wait, then you're going to have this disruption all the time. Or let's say you as a middle layer management decide something, and then the director decides another thing because he knows that customer personally, and then he goes to disrupt the whole chain. That is just weak and poor management. So you could get a lot more done if you're better at prioritizing and respecting the decision and saying, we're going to do this first, then we'll see what happens.
And when you became a manager yourself for the first time, how long it took you for you to understand that this is the much better way to manage people, and I have to help them grow, but they need their own area and space?
A lot of time. A lot. I started, so as a young Dane working in a Danish culture. I was the head of development for Bulgari Internet Security, and we had an office in Romania. And that culture was so much different, and I was not prepared for that at all. It was more like debate and pushing and being hardcore, and I was a soft boy coming just trying to everybody be friends, and then we'll figure it out. But that didn't work at all with the Romanian culture. So I did a lot of mistakes, and it toughened me up in a way to understand that I needed to take more charge. So that was my basic learning from that. Like, I need to push myself in. After that, there was a lot of other teams, also outsourcing teams with other cultures. And I surely understood that I needed to align the culture first, figuring out, instead of looking at the person, but looking at what was the underlying motive for them to act like this, and that was in the culture. Instead of taking that personal, I was prepared for it proactively, looking at how could I shape that up, saying, I know you're doing this and this is not okay. And then I could see when I would taking charge like that and saying, I'm setting the framework as a boss or a leader, call it what you want. And then we were playing around here. There's still room for maneuvering. It was all okay. And everybody relaxed a little bit. And I could see we were getting more productivity out of it when everybody just knew the frame and the rules that I set. So it took me a long time. I would say that's 10 years easily.
I actually had a discussion yesterday, the interesting topic we touched as well. A lot of young managers, when they get promoted to that manager position, the ego boost that they get is quite significant because they're managing, they have that power in their hands now to tell people what to do. And it takes a while for people to actually realize that, oh, I need to take a step back and learn how to manage people before I actually can have that power in my hands.
Nobody gets motivated by how much the owner will make for next year. They get motivated by the career. So that's the approach you take, is you're a career building person instead of being a boss, and you build people's career.
Could you differentiate what makes a good CTO, and how do you progress from being an engineer, a solo individual player, to a team manager, and how do you reach that C level?
For me, I was very much project orientated in a long way in my career, figuring out how we build projects that people actually like. At a certain time in my career, one of my guys came up to me and said, hey, I just like to go to work on a Monday morning. I never liked that ever before. So on a Friday, I like wishing the weekend to be over so I can come work with you. That was an eye opener for me, and it changed my complete approach. Instead of just looking at the product as a CTO, I started to focus on the people. That's what I think the C-level thing went in for me, to take a more highlight approach and saying, what is it I'm actually doing with my resources? Not just putting my head in the track and plowing through and getting products done. What is it, a kind of people resources I have to build this up? So that's the people part of being a CTO. Then you have a lot of tech For me, in that part, it was always trying to be generic and not love one specific tech above the other, but look at the problem instead and look at what I had to solve the problem and forgetting everything else. No religion in a way that you couldn't say, oh, well, I like this specific language or this specific framework or something like that. But always see what is the lowest cost through everything and how quick can we deliver quality. If you ask me would the priorities be from a CTO, I would say budget is the first priority. And you wouldn't hear many CTOs say that because they're like, it's technology. Because they throwing either new technology or expensive people at the problem to fix something. When you're a C-level, you need to have the business in mind and the survival of the business on a long term. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter because it's not about making cool things, cool gadgets if you're not going to stay on the market for very long. So that approach by saying, how can I buy something that's cheaper than make it myself? That's one. How can I get my people to work as optimal as possible or also the lowest salary as possible? Not just give them more money because they want. Also that to keep the people there instead of replacing them because that's again a break in a productivity. So that all comes from a budget perspective. Once you have that mindset, you started to look at problems in a completely different way. So that's why you elevate it up to a more business CTO instead of just staying in the technical room.
I think it nicely brings us into hiring and recruitment because budget is probably one of the biggest part of recruitment in general and hiring your people, and is one of the biggest annoyances for all of the talent people in general. When you get managers who, as I say, want a unicorn, but they have not even enough money to buy a pony. How do you deal with situations like that when you see a demand and you have a tight budget? What's your approach and what are your thoughts on that?
Time is money too. And so the faster the better you can hire somebody, and the faster you can correct it if it's a mistake, the better. The way I do it is not sit down and make a long list of requirements. You see that everywhere today, like super long job ads with bullet points after bullet points after bullet points. What happened there is that you're scaring everybody away. You're like really demanding, even though you probably have the best working place, that doesn't shine from your job ad. You need to stand out from that. You need to simplify it. You need to get as many people to apply to your for your position as possible so you can sit and vent all the clients. The best you can get is having a person who is happy with their current job applying to your job ad. That's what you want. The longer, the more complicated, the more demanding your job ads are, the more desperate the people that are hiring at your job are, right? So the ones that actually need a job, they don't even care, they don't even read it, they don't even have the skill set that you're requiring. Mm-hmm. They just need a job because they have to. That's not what you want. So very short, I want only, let me give you an example. So my job ads would go like this. You could spend your 5+ experience years as a Java programmer in our place, and I'll make you great. Especially for developers, they're very keen on focus and solitude to make their things. So I will write it there, right in the job ad. I respect your need to have focus and be left alone so you can solve the problems, right? So right there, and then I say a quote from some of my colleagues that say, "How am I?" Because it's me they're gonna work with. It's not the company. It's not the company goal and strategy they're going to work with. It's me as a leader. So they need to connect with me. So I make this, bond with them and say, hey, I collect happy people at work. That's my goal. That's my most important for me, to make you happy, to like coming to work on a Monday morning. Who doesn't want this job? Everybody. And then really quick is the culture. Like we do feedback all the time. We want to improve. We want to be better. And communication and ownership is everything. What is that? 4 lines of text. One of my job ads, I got a 98% appliement rate. That means that everybody saw it. Out of those was almost 98% applied to the job, which is amazing, right? So I sat there and I can look at all, and the ones that qualify within the requirements, the skill sets, I would take a really quick conversations with, and I will ask them questions about their past, not about what they think they are, not where they want to be in 5 years, or how they like me, because that's not needed. I would only ask them things that I know to be true, which is obviously past events in their career. And I can trust that 100%. I would divide everybody into 3 groups, right? Let's call them blue, green, and red. Blue, green, or red. It doesn't really matter. So blue people, I would ask them, what are you most proud of in your entire career? And they would say, well, I built something and it meant a lot to mental handicapped people in Japan because they could have a better life. And the green people would say, well, I built something. It was super complicated and I made it myself. And it was really hard to do. And was a lot. The red people would say, I was a part of a team and we did really well and we worked really nice together and I learned a lot and I'm happy to be around people. And then I would see what kind of people do I have on my team of those things, and then I'll see what I need from that because I need one of each at least, and I need more of the green ones because they are a little more worker, but I don't need so many of the blue ones. They're more visionary, and if I get too many of one, we'll have a debate on where we're going and what we can do, and they will, we need to get done. So mixing these three types mindset up gives me the best productivity. And if I would ask anybody, like yes and no answers, right? They obviously guess what's the right answer when you say, "Are you a team player?" And they would say, "Yes, of course." They know it's you have to be, right? But if I would ask, let's say you're sitting with a problem in front of you, you know you can't do it, and you have to ask one of your teammates for help. How long does it take you to reach out and say, "Hey guys, do you know something about that?" My threshold is that under 2 hours, you're a team player. Over, you're not really. Maybe you are. And over 6 or whole day, you're definitely not a team player. And it works every time. I mean, it's also cultural based. But then if you hire somebody who said, "Oh, I'm gonna sit and Google before I will ask anybody," you can say, what is it in your heart that stops you just for reaching out? If I came in right now and say, hey, go ask Paul if you've done it before, what would stop you from doing it? Oh, it's then it can be disrespect or cultural issues they have, right? And then you can speak into it and fix it when you get the person on board. And that's how I hire. And I put the people in these groups and understand how they think before I hire it. And don't really care so much about their actual level of the individual skill. If they don't have it, obviously I wouldn't have to interview.
Mm-hmm.
Have, let's say, 5 years of Java, I will put them in. And then because I know my team and they know they will work extremely well together, they'll solve everything.
You touch on a very interesting point with the job ads. I think a lot of managers still struggle to understand that there's a massive difference between job ad and job description.
Yeah.
Job description is the legal document you keep internally when you have HR team, if whatever reason you need it, but it doesn't have to be on LinkedIn with, like, I looked at a couple of jobs before joining our call, and I think the longest one I saw was almost like 2 A4 pages long. But one common requirement that I often see in, especially in startups and scale ups, that they're looking for a very strong individual player who's going to do everything independently, but is also a team player.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a very realistic requirement for people to expect that someone is going to be both very focused on individual achievements and individual work, but also is very good at working collaboratively?
Well, it's like you said, it's a unicorn, right? And it's not because that person wouldn't be willing, but because of a course of events that happens over the first 1 or 2 years when you're a startup, you have like the founder team that are very set in stone, right? And they work towards a specific release or a specific milestone to get some success or even a customer on. And that is hard to come in afterwards. But you need these people to grow, and you will see that they are very hard. It's very rare to have the same amount of people through the whole course of a company's time and you don't grow. What happens with the core is that they get a certain ownership, especially if it's a hard technology. We see it all the time that they don't want to let anyone in to the source code of the application. Right? Even though the owner needs to scale the company, the core architect or the software developer won't do it. Doesn't it's his almost personally is not right. So you don't get that people. You will get somebody who is focused, and then at some point you are stuck in a bottleneck because you can't scale it out. So what happens is, and I don't think it's like you sit down and think, oh, this is what I'm gonna do because this is smart. There's so many things that goes on. of customers and roadmaps that's changed all the time because we cannot see what the whole world looks like and make software for that. It's mostly like you go out the door with something in your backpack, and that's going to change like the next day. You're going to do something else because there was something you didn't see on the road and you have to do it. So there's so many things that the jugglers around. To sit and think that you can make a job at is like that backpack. Oh, I'm gonna do all of this. It's gonna happen in this way, in this order, and we're gonna do that and that. That never happens. And even though people wouldn't admit it, you really have to take hard decisions as you go. I think it's getting somebody in that has a good overall architect but can work and say, well, and then realize it when you get to the point where we need a little more up level leadership, you already prep them from the beginning. Is that we are not putting you in this role to give you everything and ownership, but we are going to look at how we scale our business, and these are the type that we will probably need down the road, and you're not that unless you can prove it, so they can know that I have to change my attitude to fit into a later stage of the company. That's just good management, basically, right? Prepare people for what's.
And when it comes to interviewing itself, how do you feel about long interview processes? Like some companies have 10 stages, 12 stages, free trials, you name it, there's probably someone hiring that. What are your thoughts on effective hiring and what that should look like for tech roles?
I think my record is 10 minutes where I had a discussion and hired somebody. Um, I, I can't remember who said it, but I believe it's true. If you want to take the right decision, or you want to take the wrong decision, sorry, just ask everybody. And that's what I think the fear is of all these many interviews and tests, is that we want to take the right decision. So we are trying to gather so much data as possible. What the opposite happens is that the more data you have, the more errors you would find with the person, and you would discard a perfectly okay individual because of some technicality in, let's say you would do a Rorschach test and have a psychology and evaluate what kind of mindset you have, and based on that, how can you manage that person? It's completely redundant, right? It's a waste of time. It's not something that management need to understand. When you hire a new person, how would their psychology of this person? We have the same. You go, here's some tasks, go do them, work well with others, right? There's not a, it's almost like micromanagement at, at birth, that, oh, we need to know exactly everything you are in a stressful situation. We don't, because there's no time for that. We need you to be very functional with other people, and the only way we can do it is actually just doing it. Everything is, I think, is born out of here. I understand if you have a specific technology that it's very hard to do, that you do a more skill testing on it, but I would completely rule out IQ test. I've seen people with not so much IQ do much better than one with high, because it's about collaboration, it's about the team spirit, it's about engaging more than it is to be right, and getting something done and learning from that. So I think, yeah, they're wasting their time, they're wasting the company's money, and they're not successful in their mission. What you should do instead is you hire fast based on one person's opinion. And if you do like a skill test, it can be a different person, but only one person will do the skill test and another person will do the personality test.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And they will talk, and then that's it. That's my max. Then you hire the person, and then you start to do performance feedback on engagement criteria like communication, ownership, effort, quality, even on a weekly basis. And then you would, so engagement criteria is the growth mindset that you can do as when you go to work, and you do the best you can do without influence on your coworkers, or the train was delayed, or the boss is an asshole, all those things. But you can always be engaged. You can always communicate as well as you possibly can, as available as you can. You can take ownership, ask questions, suggest other things, be actively in meetings. You can actually spend the 8 hours a day trying to solve the problems, not standing out on the coffee machine giving Netflix updates or whatnot. And you could make something that looks like quality, and the company would define that. The great thing about these criteria is you can evaluate them very often, like every week. And so you get a new person on board, you do the evaluation. Well, did you speak up in the meeting? Were you here? Were you trying? So it's completely unbiased. It's away from the project. Let's say you hire somebody into like a fusion project of some sort, and it's very difficult. It's the runway to actually starting to deliver something is very long, and you need to understand if they are the right candidate from almost week one or week two. So you only look at those engagement criteria and evaluate them and say, well, I need you to speak up during the meeting, or I need you to actually reply to these emails or something like that, to then adjust if they can or cannot be engaged. And then you will immediately understand, oh, this is the right person because they really wanted to. They take ownership of the task. They go do something, or they don't, and then you change it. And because you could do that in the second week of the employment, you can take candidate number two that was almost as good, but you didn't really know, and you took the decision, right? Because he's still warm, and you don't have to redo the whole hiring process, which takes, I don't know, 2 months or something. So you can act much faster.
But doesn't that promote a little bit of a hire and fire mentality where you hire quickly, then you fire people quickly as well?
Yeah.
But from candidates' perspective, like if I spoke with you and I was the person that I was in a full-time employment, I gave up my job to join your company, and then I
Mhm.
didn't know your exact requirements, and I joined, then you're telling me that now I have to communicate, and then within a week you decide that oh, you're actually not for us. So I'm not only that I gave up my job, I no longer have another job.
So I say I hire in adults. They also have some sort of responsibility for this. And
Hmm.
yes, I make it perfectly clear what we evaluate on. For sure, for that reason, right? And I
Hmm.
also make it clear that if you can do it, you know, we are not working well together. But the criteria are human based. I'm not giving you something that you can't do. It's not that, oh, I don't have the ability to communicate or I don't have the ability to speak up during meetings. Well, then you're probably not an adult. That's what I mean with it, right? And you should take responsibility like, oh, I want this job. He wants this from me. I can't do it. And I'm not saying, oh, I will give you one advice, or I didn't see you speak up in the meeting and you're out right away. No, no, no. Of course, you go and talk. You go and say, what is it that holds you back from not doing it? Is it something we can do? Are you afraid? I mean, try to do a little. And you just want to see an improvement. You want to see people actually go and engage themselves, right? If let's say, oh, I can't work all the time. I have to stand out in the coffee machine for half the day. It's not realistic. That's not adult work. You need to put some responsibility on it. And that's why I said, well, I lay it out in front of you. I say these are the criteria. I say that's what I'm going to evaluate. And I do that. I have to fire people afterwards. That happens. And I've never had an issue with them. They said, yes, I didn't do it. I know I didn't do it. I know I could do it, but I don't know. It's just I failed, and I don't have. And I hate it. Of course, don't get me wrong. I hate firing people. I don't sleep the night up to it. I don't. I would rather not do it, and I will go a long way, but I wouldn't sacrifice the team dynamic for a bad person, for a prima donna, or a person who just thinks they're better than everybody else, because that is a scar that sits in a long way, both for me and a manager, that I put a bad person in the team and I allow it to happen, or I force them to work with it, that they would hate me for a long time. And that cost me way more than, let's say, the honor of, oh, I hired this person in, you have to work it. I took that decision. I'd rather say, oh, that didn't work out immediately. And yeah, you lost your job, or you had the chance to go back to your job. I don't know. But I don't think all those tests that we talked about will prevent that.
So when hiring then, Klaus, what outside of the technical side, because obviously that's something that can be physically and technically tested, what are the key factors or key behaviors that you are looking in people outside of communication, obviously?
Well, like I said, ownership is key for us. Effort is also, and effort is not we are locking time, because I don't care about that. Just engagement in a way that you are doing something. You don't disappear for half an hour, 2 hours a day, and there's nothing, or you can see that in a short time everything is easy to evaluate. So when we look at effort, we can look, let's say, lines of code, or we can every Friday we can say, okay, does this look like 40 hours? I don't This doesn't matter. It's 30 hours or 40 hours. It just look like it, right? Any architect, team player, senior developer can look at a code and say, okay, I'm in the process, I'm in the domain, I know what we have to do, and it's 2 lines of code, but it actually looks like 40 hours because there's a lot of brain work going in. There was a lot of meetings. We see that it makes sense, right? Not more data driven than that. I don't want to lock people, key logging, and all those things. That's completely ridiculous. So it's just a perception of what's been delivered from a person who takes responsibility of that. I would never sit in my corner office and evaluate everybody on my criteria because that doesn't work. I want people that are involved in the team to to evaluate these criteria on each other and give them praises. So the way it works, like communication and ownership, is something product manager easily can evaluate because they're in the meetings, they're on the, let's say, Trello or Jira board, they're in the communication Slack, whatever you have. They see who is doing what, who's taking ownership, and I set the definitions of those two, so my whole company are aligned. We're in the same boat. I get evaluated by my people on how I communicate and how I take ownership and how I help them. So I am completely evaluated the same on the same criteria. It doesn't matter. It's not about the KPIs or the money or whatever I do. Because we're all the same, it's okay. And we like to be better. And if we can get more engaged, that means that our productivity go up. And if I get recognition or feedback from another peer, my motivation goes up. So be happy, right? There was I was a conference in Copenhagen at some point. There was a guy writes book, does survey. He did a survey on what does people want on Friday. Do you want a pizza and a beer? You want a day off? Or you want the boss to come and recognize you? Over 80% said, I want my boss to come and recognize me for the work I did that week. 80%. Why is it that we're not doing it? Because we don't see it. We are too busy doing something else. So my system is gathering data, real-time data, because it's not something that happened 3 months ago. It's something that happened this week you can remember on criteria that I set up. So when I see my product manager praising somebody, I make sure I do it too. That means they are highly motivated, and I don't even have to go and say and make an employee satisfaction survey because I know it every week how they are, how they feel, and I'll ask them, "How are you? That's great, man! Excellent solutions." And like I said, my productivity is through the roof simply because I do this micro recognition every week, and you can choose to do it every second week. It's fine too, but it doesn't cost me anything than 10 minutes every week, and I get the maximum productivity out of it.
You touched on a very interesting point regarding feedback, like every 3 and 6 months. I remember the biggest challenge I had is actually when I have to write feedback for myself and evaluate my last 6 months. Even I couldn't remember what I've done 5 or 6 months ago. I normally focused on what I've done in the last 4 weeks or 8 weeks because that's still fresh in my mind, especially if you're working in a very fast-paced, very constantly changing environment. So now when you said that, I was just thinking that if I had trouble remembering what I did, 99% of managers probably didn't even think of what happened 6 months ago because they have a team of 5 to 20 people sometimes.
Yeah.
For them to remember everything is almost impossible.
Yeah, and it's even worse, right? I remember in a situation from my past when I didn't do any of this, and I was walking by someone. They were on Facebook, and then I had a 6 months conversation down. That was still sitting in my head like a very negative thing. Maybe that person was 2 minutes on Facebook. I don't know, but I just had the impression they're not doing the job. And that's not fair either. It's not constructive. Maybe you can remember 2 weeks. And even that is a stretch if you try to do it. And if you sat down and make a log every Friday for yourself, and then you look back at it, you see, oh my God, I did so many good things. I made so much progress. I did a lot of work, right? And that's what we're doing for one another. It's like a career building tool in a way. And we can praise each other. You can base it also on of course salary. And this I see that a lot, especially enterprise companies where you are afraid to praise people because you're afraid they're coming back and ask for more money. That's mind-boggling for me. Because if you praise people, they will become more productive. You will reach your deadline. You will get better quality. You will eventually argue that you would make more revenue because of that, get more customers, and everything will be better. thus having money to pay that raise. Hello, instead of saying, oh, we don't not do anything, we want to demotivate people so they don't do so much productivity so we can keep the money for ourselves, but you don't have them then. It makes no sense. You would also, if you have a large team, you would easier to identify the ones who are not engaged, the ones we talked about, even though you hire them in, maybe later down the road they something else happened. I don't know, right? You could identify it much sooner than those 3 months, and you could fix it. You could make sure that the person doesn't quit or fix the conflict between two people and make everything good again and getting productivity out of back up and running. Or you just the person is not willing at all and don't want to. That happens too, and you can get rid of that person. And then again, showing everybody how you care about the dynamics of the team and how you like the happiness and the productivity by removing one bad seat. Again, it's all good to do it in small chunks. The problem is you can't if you don't know. I was pitching my idea to an enterprise, a customer we have to do what I do with the evaluations because we have an app for it. And he said, no, but we do this employee surveys, anonymous. And I said, okay, so what do you do when the result came back? How do you do it? And he just laughed. And he's like, well, nothing. Obviously, there's nothing to do. You can't do nothing with it. But it was a check in the box for the managers to say, well, we do employee surveys. So everything is good.
And they hope that all of the issues going to automatically disappear next time they're going to do the same survey without any actions in place.
It's like taking your temperature once in a while and seeing if you're sick.
I feel like we touched on that already a little bit, but in your intake form, you said a very interesting sentence that traditional HR is dead. So could you elaborate on what you mean by this and what the future of HR looks to you and in your eyes?
Yeah. Well, we also have a lot of new generations, right? They're born and raised completely different than we are. And I think the combination is they also seek some sort of recognition in their work. And today, traditional HR are very reactive, very big, enormous frameworks. It costs a lot of money. And these generations are not used to waiting around for you to get your ass in gear and fixing their problems. They need a solution right now. We as a leader, especially because these generations are so much more different than we ever been used to, we need to do it a different way. We need to go in a fast paced, trying to also show that we have their backs, that we have the support. And thus I mean traditional HR are dead if we want to retain and maintain the new workforce coming up. They will leave us. They are demanding. They want to work from home whenever they want. And you can't know what anybody do if you don't have a process of the engagement criteria that I say, because there's nobody who can see them. I mean, you say, right, you have to say evaluate yourself, then you evaluate a coworker for 3 months or 6 months, and you have no idea what's going on. They will never work with these people moving around, fast paced, in and out, working for a year, finding another job, as we've seen already. So in that way, you need to revolutionize HR. It needs to be data driven. It needs to have AI as well, because we can't sit and spend 1 month evaluating open-end questions, whether or not they're good or whether or not they're bad or what does it mean. We need to do it very, very quickly. Actually having a weekly report generated by AI using all the data points that you can get today, because we're on the computer, so you can see how many meetings people have, how many emails they send, how many messages they send. Even there's a privacy issue. You wouldn't read possibly what they say, but you could. It's not supervision. It's professional, modern people management to understand where does things goes wrong. How can I affect people's happiness and motivation in the best way to make sure that we get the most productivity out of it. I think we will have a retention problem with the new generations because they will leave without a second thought if we don't shape up. And we can't wait 4 months for some, what do you call those teamworks? What do you call it when you go on a retreat and you're building bridges and drinking beer around the fireplace? They won't wait for that. They don't care about it.
And where do you think that change has to come from? Is it the HR themselves? Candidates has to push back a little bit more for that change, or it has to actually come with the realization of the top level, realizing that, okay, we need a change. We need to do something to make it better for our employees.
I think it's the top layer. I don't see a lot of innovation in HR. Traditional HR tools are facilitating the same process of questionnaires and the thing that they don't really want to change. Everybody that I approach with it is C-level that cares about numbers, that can see the budget is hurting based on the rollover of the people getting fired or leaving, and productivity go down. Right? That's where the pain is. That's why you have to address the top layer and say, hey, you need to change the whole leadership. Maybe you don't need an HR in a way. You need to take the HR responsibility back into management level and say, well, it's more like they're assistants, but you need to approach the people and say, I've seen you, I know what you're doing, and try to be the mentor, leader they need and they want.
Perfect. I'm already cautious that we can talk for hours, but as of now, what are your future goals, both professionally and personally, Klaus?
Professionally, I would like to succeed with this application that we have done, getting it out there and really showing people how efficient it is to make everybody happy to come to work on a Monday morning, being motivated, and how easy it is if you do it in very small chunks. That would be my biggest professional wish for my future. Personally, I don't know, because I feel like work is all I do. I keep myself fit. I eat healthy. So personally, I would just like to become as old as possible. I'm very into longevity. I really try to take care of myself, whatever that be. So I have been carnivore for a really long time. I know a lot of debate about good. It just really works for me. That's my journey to just become more active all the time. I'm 50, almost 2 years old, and I wish that I could stay active, travel the world, see the whole thing, learn new things every day. I always challenge myself. I started to learn piano. I want to take singing lessons. I'm really bad at it, but it's not. It's funny, but I know it's a long way. But that's to just expand my universe as long as I live.
Perfect. That
Yeah.
sounds awesome. And singing lessons is on my to-do list as well, because
Great.
I'm really bad as well. So if you ever need a bad singing partner, let me know. We can't
Let's do
scare the
that.
whole
That's
world.
very fun. Oh my god, we could be a choir.
And what parting advice would you give to our listeners who are currently navigating their careers and aspiring to be leaders in their field or enter software engineering, technology field?
What do you say? Be good to work with, right? Try not to be stubborn. Try not to be debatable, but be that person who you can always trust. Be open, communicative, and be just a pleasant to be to be around. I see that's probably the what do you call that? The underrated skill. What I'm collecting is just really pleasant people to work with. Yeah, and skill is
Be
not.
kind to others.
Yeah, be kind to others, and you can always learn a new thing. And probably you have to unlearn some things as well sometimes. Your identity is fluent, right? You're not just
Mhm.
one thing. You become something else, and you go with it.
That's a great advice. And I think just to what you said, learning new things is always exciting, but unlearning old things is as exciting
Yeah,
and sometimes even more challenging. To be honest, most of the time is more challenging.
absolutely.
And finally, Klaus, how can our listeners connect with you or follow your work? Do you have any upcoming projects or initiatives you would like to share?
Well, I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Um, I'm just Claus Villumsen. That's it. You can search me on Silver CTO because I started a YouTube channel some time ago. I'm not good at maintaining it, but I wanted to do more small videos, but I haven't gone around to it. But that's called Silver CTO because I'm like gray beard, gray in my hair, so what had to stand out. Yeah, so that's the best way.
Perfect. I'm going to add all of the links in the description so people can click on it and get to you directly. But for now, thank you so much for being with us today, Klaus. It was an absolute pleasure, very insightful discussion. And I'm sure we're going to meet at some point again because I feel like there's so many more topics that we could have discussed.
Cool. I would like that. Thank you so much.